A single gunshot in a crowded Philly street can change a life forever, but what if that one moment wasn't just random violence? What if it was the start of something much deeper? Something that shaped one of the most dangerous minds in the power universe? Because the truth behind young Tommy's shooting is not as simple as fans were told. And new details from people close to the story suggest that Knight was hiding secrets nobody wanted to talk about. In the streets of Philadelphia, nothing feels safe for long. Every corner carries a story, and every story carries danger. Young Tommy was growing up in a world where respect was not given, it was taken. If you hesitated, you lost. If you showed fear, you became a target. This was the kind of environment where kids learned fast, not from school, but from survival. Tommy wasn't just watching the streets, he was becoming part of them. Even before the incident, people around him noticed something different. He didn't just react to violence, he understood it in a way most kids never could. That understanding would later turn him into someone who trusted almost no one and solved problems with force instead of words. But back then, he was still young, still shaping who he would become, and still standing too close to a world that was already collapsing around him. The night of the shooting didn't begin like something important. It started like many other nights in that neighborhood. Loud voices, fast movement, and tension sitting under every conversation. But something was different in the air, something heavy that nobody noticed until it was too late. Young Tommy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe, depending on who you believe, exactly the right place for someone else's plan. What is known is that an argument broke out nearby, something small at first, but in that world, small problems never stay small for long. Words turned sharp, pride got involved, and suddenly the situation wasn't just talk anymore. People who were there later described it differently. Some said it was random, others said it felt planned, like someone had already decided how the night would end before it even began. And in the middle of that confusion, shots were fired. Everything after that became noise, panic, and running feet. But one thing stayed behind the chaos. Young Tommy didn't just get caught in violence. He became part of a story that people would talk about for years, without ever fully agreeing on what really happened. After the shooting, the street didn't go back to normal. It never does after something like that. Rumors started spreading faster than the truth. Some said it was a warning shot that went wrong. Others believed it was a message meant for someone close to Tommy, not him directly. There were even whispers that the situation had been set up, that someone wanted to send fear through the neighborhood, and Tommy was simply standing in the wrong shadow at the wrong time. What makes this story even more confusing is how quickly everything was covered up or changed depending on who was telling it. No one story matched another, and that alone made people question what really happened that night. In environments like Philly's toughest blocks, silence can sometimes mean more than answers. The less people said, the more dangerous the truth might have been. Years later, when cast members and people connected to the early Power storyline began speaking about Tommy's origins, small details started to surface that changed how fans looked at that moment. It wasn't just described as a random childhood injury or street incident anymore. It was hinted that certain parts of that night were never fully shown or explained on screen. Some conversations suggested that Tommy's survival was not just luck, but something that influenced his entire path moving forward. The idea that this one moment shaped his loyalty, his anger, and even his future connection to power and crime began to make more sense when looking at it through these new comments. It raised a question that fans couldn't ignore anymore. Was Tommy simply a victim of street violence, or was he pushed into becoming the person the world of power needed him to be? And if more details keep coming out, it might completely change how people understand his beginning. In Philadelphia's toughest neighborhoods, childhood doesn't feel like childhood for long. It feels more like training for survival. Every day teaches something new, but most of those lessons are not safe or gentle. For young Tommy, this environment was not just background noise in his life. It was the main teacher shaping everything he would become. The streets were loud, unpredictable, and often unfair, but they had their own rules, and Tommy learned them faster than most kids around him. Respect mattered more than anything, and fear was always just one mistake away. In places like this, people don't grow up slowly. They harden quickly because softness is often punished without warning. Tommy's world was built on constant tension. Even normal moments carried pressure underneath them. A simple walk down the block could turn into a test of awareness. Who is watching? Who is talking? Who is planning something? These thoughts were not unusual. They were daily life. He learned early that trust was dangerous because the wrong trust could put you in danger without warning. Friends could switch sides, conversations could be traps, and silence sometimes meant more than words. This shaped Tommy in a way that made him different from other kids. While others might think before reacting, Tommy was learning to react before thinking. Because hesitation in his world often came with consequences. Family influence and street influence mixed together in a complicated way. There was no clean separation between home and outside life. What happened on the streets followed him back inside, and what was inside the home shaped how he moved outside. This kind of environment creates confusion in a young mind, especially when violence becomes normal. Tommy started to understand that power wasn't something you waited for. It was something you took or defended at all times. If you didn't stand your ground, someone else would define your place for you. That belief slowly became part of his identity, even before he fully understood what identity meant in that world. People around him began to notice small signs of change. He didn't back away from conflict the way other kids did. Instead, he leaned into it, as if confrontation was something familiar rather than frightening. Even when situations were not directly about him, he often stayed close, watching and learning how people reacted under pressure. The streets were like a classroom with no teachers, and Tommy was one of its most attentive students. Every argument, every fight, every warning became a lesson stored in his mind. Over time, this made him more confident in dangerous situations, but also more distant from normal emotional reactions. Fear, hesitation, and doubt started to fade, replaced by something colder and more controlled. Philadelphia itself played a major role in shaping this mindset. It was not just a location, it was an atmosphere that influenced behavior. Certain blocks had reputations that everyone respected or feared. You didn't walk through them casually, you moved with awareness even when you tried to act relaxed. The sound of sirens was not rare, and neither was the sudden change in mood that could turn an ordinary evening into something serious. In this kind of city, children grow up understanding risk earlier than comfort. Tommy absorbed all of this without needing anyone to explain it. He didn't learn safety first, he learned survival first, and everything else came later, if it came at all. As time passed, Tommy's personality began to show clear edges forming. He was becoming someone who valued loyalty, but demanded it strongly. Someone who could care deeply, but also shut that care off when necessary. This balance was not natural, it was created by experience. The streets were teaching him that emotion could be used against you, so control became important. The more unpredictable the environment became, the more controlled he tried to be. But control in a place like this is never perfect. It is always under pressure, always being tested, always one moment away from breaking. By the time tension started building in his surroundings leading up to the shooting incident, Tommy was already shaped by years of quiet conditioning. He wasn't just a kid in a neighborhood anymore, he was someone who had adapted to a world where danger felt normal. And that adaptation would later become the foundation for everything people recognize about him in the power universe. The night of the shooting begins to take shape only when you look at it piece by piece, because in real time, everything moved too fast for anyone to fully understand. What people remember is not a clean story, but broken fragments. A few voices, sudden movement, rising tension, and then the moment everything shifted. Young Tommy was there, but the situation around him was already unstable before anything violent happened. According to different versions of the story, there was no clear warning that things would escalate so quickly. Yet the energy in the air suggested that something was already building underneath the surface. It started with a simple interaction, the kind that normally would not be interpreted